Sorry.
Okay, welcome back to the Infrastructure Committee, reconvened, and the first item is public forum, and I welcome Mr. Anton Bayliss. Please come up and speak to us on public transport.
Just up there.
Low vision, and it's I'm not quite sure of the protocol.
Oh, you come in, please sit at the...
Alaric is going to help him.
Oh, right, yeah, if you, Anton, can come and sit at the, sorry, sit at this table here.
Low vision.
Okay, the way it works, Anton, is that...
Thank you.
Okay, Anton,
Try not to bang into it.
Anton, the way it works is that you have 10 minutes assigned to you, and you can use it 5 minutes to talk to us and then have 5 minutes worth of questions, or whichever way you want to use it. So,
Sure.
time is yours.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to attend and speak to you all. I did submit a summary email in advance, so I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to read that. But just to recap, or just to set the context, I am low vision, a member of the New Zealand Blind and Low Vision Society. I moved to Invercargill just under 3 years ago. And I live in what I call a little hamlet called Invercargill, just off Retreat Road, which is a fairly new area. Used to be a chicken farm, but it now contains about 40 to 50 households in that area. So there is a mixture of families and elderly people in this area. Now, to be honest and fair, just about everyone in Invercargill has a car except me. So I rely on taxis to get into town. And I was looking at using the bus to get into town, but my research led me to find that I had to walk 30 minutes to North Road to find my nearest bus stop, which is fairly impractical for me being low vision. So this sort of started me on I'd like to say a personal crusade, but as I thought about it more, I thought this is more relevant to other people in my area and in the greater area as well. I canvassed the neighbourhood, the Invercargill neighbourhood, and I asked people if there was a bus stop that was closer to our neighbourhood, would you use it? The responses that I received were mainly from families that had teenage children. If the children missed the school bus home because of after-school activities or practice, then either the parents have to go and pick them up, or they have to walk to the public bus, get the public bus, and then make the long 30-minute walk back to home. In saying that, there were also a few elderly people that currently do drive, but they're thinking that maybe in a few years they may, have to surrender their license, as I had to 4 years ago, and then they're looking at relying on family, friends, taxis, because the bus service isn't practical for them. So that's setting the context. As I thought about this more, I started thinking that maybe the bus service needs a redesign or an addition, and this is what a lot of cities do in New Zealand, Christchurch being one of them, is having a loop service, a bus service that loops around the main avenues. So in Invercargill's case, I would suggest Tay Street, D Street, Bainfield Road, and Queen's Drive, and a regular clockwise or anti-clockwise bus service that looped around The other benefit being there are many businesses, community groups and schools in that loop, so it would service those as well. And going one step further, not getting too carried away, but looking to the future, that this bus service could be made environmentally friendly, either via electric buses or biodiesel buses. So yeah, that is my submission. I suppose the immediate thought is having a bus service that is, or a bus stop at least, that is on the corner of Bainfield and Queen's Drives. Yeah, I'm not sure about the practicalities of that, but that is sort of, yeah, the reason I'm here today, I suppose.
Okay, thanks, Anton. I'm going to start with Darren and then Nobby.
Anton, were you aware that there was a loop service that went up Queen's Drive, came up to Kildare Street to Bainfield Road, because actually getting any closer to the Bainfield Queen's Drive intersection you encountered traffic issues with the roundabout, but that it wasn't extensively used?
Yeah, I was informed that a few months ago when I first raised this, and the advice I was given is that there used to be a bus stop in Kildare. There was a survey done a few years ago which resulted that, you're correct, it wasn't extensively used, so that bus stop or that service was taken away. And the advice I was given was that the closest bus stop to me was North Road.
Yeah.
And that was from council too, that advice.
Mr. Mayor.
Anton, just a bit of a reflection from me, I guess. One of the things that we've looked at is where we might do some joint ventures in the future in relation to aged care facilities. And part of that may, and I stress may, involve some property that we own in Bainfield Road. That's something we might be looking at. And if that were the case, there would be justification for a loop bus that might extend past North Road and come down Bainfield and go back into the city, because there would be aged care people that would want to use that. So I'm not promising anything, because there's a lot of work to be done on that yet, but there is still some potential there, I think.
Further questions? Anybody? Yes, Evelyn.
I'm just curious. I like circular routes, and we did used to have them, but I'm curious why you think that only North Invercargill qualifies for one. And I recognise that it's because you live there, but I'm reasonably confident that there are aged, low vision, etc. people who live south of Tay Street who might likewise do with that service. So just putting it out there.
Yeah.
The logistics that you're talking about, where you live versus where there is a bus stop, must apply to others in that area as well, not necessarily in Invercargill, because if you look at Bainfield Road as a whole and the feeder streets that go in there. So have you looked at surveying that area wider, not just your Invercargill area, but the Holloway streets, all those streets that also would have to go down to North Road to catch the bus, to see just how much of a driver there is for that sort of service? I mean, probably really, well, I should be saying a city should do it, but the staff behind me, so I won't say that. But if the issue is how far it is for a bus stop, then it must apply to a significant population area, not just Invercargill. It would be those suburbs on the south side of Bainfield Road as well. And perhaps there's a bigger need than we have actually identified.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is really just a case of starting small, I suppose, but looking wider afield. So, yeah, no, I take that point.
I wish I could say that we will solve the problem for you and there will be a bus tomorrow, but sadly, it's not within my skill set.
No, and just to add, as I mentioned, this started off as a personal selfish crusade, I suppose, from my point of view, and it sort of, I started sort of drawing a larger picture. from my own personal viewpoint, I can use a total mobility card in taxis, which is easier for me than a bus. So I'm really here to bat for others, I suppose.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Right, any other further questions? There isn't. So thank you very much, Anton, and I appreciate you coming in. Squeaky wheels always get oiled, so thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That takes us to the next thing we need to do is receive a major laid item. So can I have someone move? We may receive the major laid item strategic approach to waste. Thank you, Barry. And have a seconder. Thanks, Grant. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
We've done that. Okay, that takes us on to the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee, 6th of June. Can I have someone move those? Thank you, Panya. And seconded Leslie. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
That is carried, and that moves us on to the proposed right of way name. And does anyone on staff wish to speak to that, or we receive the report? You want to? Welcome, Patricia.
Kia ora, councillors. This is a standard right-of-way naming, though I do want to just note that it is not in 100% compliance with our policy. We are still encouraging developers to think of te reo names and work with the tūrunaka in relation to that, but we are trying, and that's where we're doing it with best efforts at that at the moment.
Right. Any questions for Patricia? Yes, Rhea.
Thank you, Patricia. I too noted that I felt that the policy that we have around proposed names just didn't quite cut the mustard here. In that instance, when we've got 2 or 3 names, is the council at all able to put forward a te reo name if we don't see one?
We can, but it's making sure that a te reo name is appropriate to both runaka. And it's having that list, which we are working with the runaka to create a list of names that people could use.
Yeah, we were looking at a list, but we also encourage people to look at the. We also were encouraging people to look at the area in which they were doing, these subdivisions were happening, and to do a bit of research into the whakapapa themselves, and we would assist with te reo names if they found something that was relevant to that area.
So supplementary to that, thank you. I'm obviously not mana whenua, I'm mata waka.
It's okay.
And sitting here, I've in my mind thought about Otatara and thought about the origins and looked at a couple of potential names that they could take for consideration. One of them being Ara Harekeke, which is the flax lane. The other one, and that's because relevantly to their history, there was massive flax mills out there, and it was a thriving industry. And then the other consideration just today, which is I thought quite quick, was the Ara Kurawai lane, which is to do really because a kurawai is symbolic of leadership, and it's also to care for our people and our environment. And when we look at Otatara and what we have out there in our environmental areas is local native bushwalks, trees, plants, birds. I mean, they're relatively quite straightforward potential names for that consideration that would meet our policy. So that's my views of putting something like that forward.
Okay, Nobby.
Just some clarification, Michael or Patricia. So this is not necessarily a road change name. it's a right of way. Is there some difference with that? Because my understanding is the subdivision that's being proposed here sits in front of the house of the people that own it. So the Campbells sit up in 17 Niven, if you know where that is, on the curve as you go around. So they've had a big space of land which they've run predominantly horses on. So they're obviously subdividing that. So it's not as though it's a sort of traditional new street. It's the existing road already runs to their house. It's just giving a name to it because they're going to have some sections running off that piece of driveway, which is what it is. So is there some difference between a right of way and a more traditional road?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, and if Patricia wants to answer, I'm happy to. So the short answer is no. In terms of the naming rules, it is considered the same,
Okay.
and that is reflected in the fact that it will be called such and such, Oak Ridge Way,
Yeah.
as to recognise that it is a private right of way that has been named for identification purposes, as opposed to a more formal street in a bigger subdivision like we've just heard about in Verori. But which then, of course, as a street vests in council.
Yep. So at this stage, if we are not happy that at least one of the names in there is not Te Reo, I'd like to understand the process. So does that mean that we go back to them and say one of them must be Te Reo, and then at the end of that exercise, if they still come back with Oak Ridge, this is the owners, are we then saying that's not acceptable, it needs to be the Te Reo?
So council is the ultimate decision maker on the name.
Yep.
So if council was to choose to take a Te Reo name,
Yep.
it would be entitled to do so, even if that was against the developer's wishes. But if council was to do that, it would be obviously good practice for staff to have the opportunity to advise the developers that that was an outcome that was being considered by council.
Okay, thank you.
Darren.
I guess it's just reflecting on the information that Michael's just given us. I see the desire to have a Te Reo name as an option, but we haven't specifically put that forward to developers and ask them. Currently, we have a policy. You've got something that meets the policy, and I think we're in a position where we have to approve it. But I think we should also revisit the policy and ask for that to be part of it, so that way applicants know that that's something that they have to consider as a way of process.
Evelyn.
So, not that we compared notes, but I want to support what Darren has said because that was where I was going as well. I had a conversation with Councillor Bond earlier, and this sits within our takiwa. The names that she put forward are not inappropriate for the area, however, not necessarily appropriate for this particular situation. And I'm not going to, I think it's desirable to have some alternatives that are not continuing the past trends of necessarily wiping our stories off the face of the earth, but at the same time, I think this is actually quite a discrete piece of space, and I understand the logic that has been applied by the owners who are proposing this. I think Darren's point about the policy and subdivision is a good one, in that we should be encouraging those people subdividing to look wider than their personal history with the place and look at the wider story of the place, in which case the issue of flax mills or whatever may have come up. That's a different analysis. And I think from my perspective, as I've been looking at this whole providing of te reo names, is that I would rather do it on a case-by-case basis rather than people select something from a list and try and apply it to a place that's inappropriate. For example, having something that is to do with inland, so a maunga or something like that, and try and put it on the side of the estuary, because that's not where we would be going. So I think in total, I'm not opposed to this. I don't think it's a biggie, but I do like the thought processes that Councillor Bond has put behind her drawing attention to the fact that by saying harakeke, you're using it to a context that people understand, which is flax. By using the word ara, which is another way for a way finding, a footpath, or not a footpath, a laneway or things like that. We could use huanui as a road instead of something or other road. It'd be achieving those sorts of things as well. It's a bigger conversation, but I've moved away from the idea of having a list of names. Can I just say that? Sorry, Patricia. Because I think that has a potential for abuse as well. So, but it's a thought-provoking conversation, and I'm glad we're having it. And I thank Councillor Bond for her initiative in bringing it forward.
Thank you.
We have Leslie, then Alex.
Thank you. It's not the first time we've been in this position since we've instituted the policy, where we did ask for preference that a te reo name be at least considered in those that was put forward. And I feel it's quite appropriate to express disappointment that once again that hasn't happened. And I agree with Councillor Ludlow's idea that we look again at this policy. Obviously just saying we'd like to see a te reo name hasn't necessarily meant that not just this developer but others haven't looked into it. And I do just reflect in this case, while I agree with Reverend Cook that we can accept Oak Ridge, but the Oak Ridge reference goes back to 2001. My feeling on this particular Otara area is that the history exploration could have gone back a great deal further and found a more appropriate name that actually probably fitted better with a lot of the other names of surrounding areas with a little bit more research. So yeah, I just expressed disappointment that once again we're faced with no acknowledgement that we have indicated we would like to see te reo names in the choices, and perhaps it is time we looked at the policy again.
Okay, Alex.
Thank you. I've just had a look at like Google Maps and Apple Maps around the area, and I think on reflection of what they've proposed in the scheme plan, I just really wanted to clarify which part they're cutting off Niven Road at, because it appears that that entire driveway past the first house on in the initial lot, that where if it's cutting it off and that was all being proposed being turned into Oak Ridge Way, it's already listed as Niven Road. Have we triple checked that that's not actually a current standing road that we're trying to rename? Oh. And is that, and therefore is that person there in the front house okay with their address being changed?
Yeah, but it's coming over.
I'll have to come back to you on that one, Councillor.
Because that and they connect to Niven Road as well, right there. So if their access then would be coming off Oak Ridge Way, are they happy? Do they need to be consulted on whether or not their street name would be changed? How's that going to work?
It would be consultation.
Yeah. So, and are we sure that that's been confirmed?
It's good. It's normally done. We will work at that between the committee.
Sorry to throw the cat in the bag, but yeah, I've just noticed that the whole road is Niven Road, right up to the up to number 17. So if that's already a pre-existing road, we can't go ahead of renaming it and giving it away. So can we check that, please?
We will check whether that would be unusual for that to be legal road up there.
Yeah, so like where does the legal road end? Would be where I want to.
Or whether it's just a driveway.
Yeah.
It's driveway.
I think it's driveway.
It is a
driveway.
Okay, Nobby.
Yeah, so where does the legal road end?
The legal road will stop at the.
Just stops there.
It stops at the.
Stops at the road.
At the road.
There's actually a big barrier there.
Stops at the end.
Yep, so
You can't drive any
I can
further
help
on
clarify
Niven Road.
that.
Okay, excuse me, can we just have Nobby
Yeah,
talk?
look, I've done the rural run there. There are 3 houses on Niven Road. The renaming's part of the driveway that goes into the house at the very back, which is owned by the Campbells. So it's quite a long road, but it is what you'd call at the moment a driveway, private driveway. Goes past paddocks into the house at the very top on the ridge. So that's, I guess, where the subdivision is going to go, and that's where they want the renaming. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
No, sorry, that wasn't what I had my hand up for. Look, I'm a bit nervous about where we're going on all this. I heard Darren say that we should revisit the policy, and I agree, but we'll need to consider some very sensitive issues around this. So if we want to increase te reo names in the city, and this is a good example, if we were to insert a name into it, then are we doing that for the benefit of getting the owner of the subdivision to adopt the te reo name in good faith? Or are we saying we're putting in so that we've got an option that we can mandatorily do that? And if that's our push going forward for the next 10 subdivisions to have te reo names, which is that's what the policy needs to say, then it needs to say that so that people don't get excited about having their own family or historical names in there only to find we override them. And so that policy will need to cover that off. And I think that will be a very sensitive issue when you start doing it, because the history of Invercargill, from what I can see, has been that the developers are allowed to have family names or family history involved, and we will be taking that away if we do. So.
Okay, Tom. Well, my question is, would we need to consult on that, an alteration of that magnitude?
With that, I'd have to take advice from Rhiannon, but we may have to.
Yeah.
Because of changing, but whether it's considered to be just a minor change, and we would try and time it with something else that we were doing.
Right.
So we wouldn't be doing an independent consultation with that alone if we had to.
Tom.
So since the beginning of this triennium, I think we've had several, 4 or 5 streets to name. I don't recall ever there being a te reo name proposed. So and yet I know the policy, which I support. So I put myself in the shoes of the developer, and not only to the extent that they're aware of it, not only are they asked to include a te reo option, but picking up an Evelyn's point, it needs to be a relevant te reo option. It's not just Kakapo or Tui or something. It's going to be a relevant. That must be quite difficult, actually. And I wonder whether we just need to provide them with more guidance. If we don't provide them with a list, and understand Evelyn's point, if we don't provide them with a list, there has to be a process by which they can bring forward a te reo name which is relevant to that area. And whether that's they have a contact to, speaks to Panya Relevant or something, I don't know. But if I was a developer, I would have no idea, unless it was Tui Kakapo or something, which we don't want 50 of those. So, my point is, let's develop a process. Let's give the developer a letter that says, this is what you do. You must bring forward a te reo option, and here is how you arrive at that option. Because otherwise you're never going to get one.
Yeah.
Unless the developer is himself.
Just a question, Patricia. If the road is privately maintained and doesn't come under council jurisdiction on that aspect, does this policy apply to that? If it's privately maintained at the cost of the residents?
I think it still does. Yeah. And Michael's nodding in front
so
of me.
So they're paying for a road.
Because it's an identification for that property, for emergency services, for that.
I think it definitely needs consultation in that case then, because if you're funding the cost of a road, I think there needs to be universal acceptance of names. Any more questions or comments regarding this? Otherwise, we'll move straight to the recommendations, and they are to receive the report and recommend to council that the proposed right of way be named Oak Ridge Way. Can I have someone move that, please? Grant, seconded Peter. Put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you. Now we're...
Can we just double check? Can you someone just make a note of double check?
Can we just make that subject to the check that seemed necessary?
It wouldn't have come here if it didn't.
No.
Well, Patricia didn't seem absolutely certain about that.
Patricia, how do you feel that the report has covered any anomalies that Alex raised, or do you want us to?
The risk of is it actually the road?
Okay, the recommendation is going to council. Which is there a meeting this month? A council meeting?
Tuesday, next week.
John, right.
This time 7 days.
7 days we've got to do that. Okay. So we're stopping a road. Are we taking names away? Are we? No. Heather, welcome.
I was a bit confused when it's not here. Oh, it's just it's a picture.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a small parcel of land outside of 11 Catherine Street. It's an historic parcel of land that parcels of land beside it appeared to have already been stopped and amalgamated into the title. This property was recently purchased and the new owners have applied to stop that parcel of land outside their boundary and amalgamate it to theirs. They're obviously significantly considering it part of theirs with the encroachments that are in there, and all costs associated will be met by the applicant, including the purchase of the land. Are there any questions?
Yeah, questions. Yes, Alan.
Just a quick question. It just looks like it's actually already part of their section.
Yeah. Yes, I
so
did.
Really, it's just a. I mean, how come if it's a part of an old road that there's not it's on both sides?
I suspect when it was originally
way back.
Surveyed, the road was significantly wider, and then the road has been developed a lot.
So all the neighbours must have done the same thing, have they?
Yes, they will have.
Yeah, because they don't align it.
Further questions? It's just a bit of an anomaly. Alex.
Do they just pay market rate for the additional slice of paradise?
The frontage and road.
Yes, we'll get it valued. Yeah.
Evelyn.
So I recognise that because they've drawn it to our attention and they want it to be stopped as the road, they're going to have to think. It seems sort of slightly wrong that we're charging them for something that everybody else got for nothing, because they didn't ask and they've just, you know, how long has this been going on?
I can't guarantee that the other landowners got it for nothing, because we would have had to stop parcels of the road and amalgamate them with the titles at the same time. So I can't comment on what's happened in the past.
Because Catherine Street is quite a well-established street. It sort of puzzles me that this could have gone on for so long. It was well inhabited when I was a child, so we're talking about 70 years or so, where there's been housing that have occupied those spaces. It just seems really strange that there's just this one that's been caught up like that.
Right,
one that we know of.
Yeah. Before I continue, just Heather, can you answer, when the people buy these properties, their lawyers see the actual deeds and they know straight away that this is part of the...
Potentially this came to the purchaser's attention through a land information memorandum, where they noted that the boundary of their property was actually...
So every property purchase would have done due diligence, and if you don't, it's the buyer beware. So I have Leslie next.
Thank you. I was just going to say exactly that this almost certainly occurred during due diligence, and without doing quite a bit of historic research, we don't know for sure that this has not happened ever. Both sides of this parcel already for others, and it probably has, because it was an uninformed road, so it would obviously have been the length of Catherine Street. So I suspect it has happened before, and it would be a very time-consuming bit of historical research to ask our staff to look at how many of the other owners in Catherine Street had already gone through this process. But I suggest there's been quite a few, because it would have been discovered during due diligence for purchase of the property. So it just seems to me a very practical solution here. Obviously we can't, until we've done the number 3 commencement of the consultation, we can't say who's going to end up being the purchaser, but it would seem a very practical matter to deal with this anomaly that appears to be the last bit of Catherine Street that is left this way. And it may be that at some time in the past boundary pegs have been moved and that people assumed it was part of their property anyway, and due diligence has discovered it, which is exactly what might have happened with other properties on both sides.
Okay, Barry.
How far does this actually go back? Does it just go back to the back of their boundary, or?
This is the.
It's just that little parcel that you see on the aerial. So the street is in front.
Stop here. Yeah.
The street is in front, and then
Outlined in orange.
Yeah. That's what they're after.
and the house is behind that.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, we have Alan, then Tom.
Oh, I think it should be taken into account the fact that these people have obviously been looking after this and thought it was their own for the last 70 years. I'm not saying that those people have been there for 70 years that are there now, but as you can see, it's got the concrete drive runs over it, and it is also forms about 3/4 of the front lawn with well-established trees and things. So I'd be thinking that it would be sort of almost just a transfer of ownership, in my view. What do you?
So we still have to go through the whole public notification process and do the survey process. So there are costs associated. It's whether council, as part of that, wished for them to purchase the land as well as part of that cost.
Okay, Tom, you are the last. This has been quite a lengthy discussion about.
When you look at the map, and I don't just mean this large-scale map, I mean, when you look at the map of Catherine Street, obviously all of the houses on that side of the street sit in the same alignment. So you would think that all of them, either it would apply to all of them, this issue, or this has just been a simple mistake at some point in the past, probably by us.
Again, I without doing a lot of research, I wouldn't be able to determine how.
No, but my question is this the only part of that's still shown as road, or is the whole of Catherine Street, which it must be half a mile?
I haven't researched the balance of Catherine Street, but within that block, this is the only one in that block.
So I mean, sorry through you, Chair. I mean, I would just wonder if this is just a straight mistake by council at some point in the distant past, in which case, you know, should we really expect a resident to pay the cost?
Just fix it.
Sorry, Mike's gonna.
Yeah. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. So you can see now this will be something that has affected at least this section of Catherine Street. If you look at the diagram, you can see the neighbouring property also has white lines, which indicates that at some stage that was road that has been surrendered and given its own lot as part of that record of title for that property. Whereas if you go to the left, you'll see that there is no white line, which means that that road has been incorporated into that piece of record of title through an amalgamation process. Christine North will have told me if I've got the term wrong for that technically, but it's essentially what it's done. So it is something that has happened, and it's just been something, I think, that as everyone has said, over the forces of time, people have lost the fact that this was legal road, and you see a nice berm and people have planted it, and as everyone else has said, it's a limb issue, but it is something that happens from time to time, and when council gets it brought to our attention, it is something that comes through to be addressed. Road stopping is one way. There's another one, just for your information and not to take up too much time, there's a building line restriction as well that was applied on a number of properties that had a similar sort of effect to protect the road in case council wanted to widen the road for whatever reason. That was another mechanism that was used rather than simply having a large road. So hopefully that helps with some of the history.
Okay, right, that is it. Grant, you'd like to move these three recommendations? Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Leslie. I'll put those three recommendations. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? They are carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Takes us to the city activation plan. Is the activator.
Is the activator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Take this report as read. This is just a for information update in support of the following paper, which is proposing 3 road closures to enable the city centre activation event plan to occur. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, so does this include tab 9, the road closures? What you're speaking to?
I'm only speaking to the Dreams and Sparkles. We've got pumps and pipes to come behind me.
Okay. Right. Any questions for Steve?
Lord help Buller Council. All I can say to that.
Any questions for Steve? Yes, Evelyn.
So I'm just a little puzzled why we're looking at Don Street closure when it's a two-way road, when one of the purposes of Esk Street was that it was a one-way street.
Well, this is actually not the.
I know,
road closure
but the event, the activation, is to take place in Don Street, and that's my question. Why did we look at Don Street as an activation space when I thought that was part of the discussion about Esk Street? I'm not opposed totally, but it is a slightly more complicated thing in my mind because it's a two-way street, and it affects also a wider range of activities. So when these events came to us, were they initiated by us or they've been initiated by others?
So you've got a few questions in there I can answer the Don Street one because there's a liquor license that applies to it, and without venturing an opinion on whether it's approved or not, the holders of the liquor license are in Don Street.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's a Sunday night.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, and look, it's a valid question. When you look at the development of both Don Street and Esk Street, they have been done with the mind to being able to be activated for events, and the rating basis is subject to the targeted rate, and the activation program is funded through that targeted rate. So we are looking at CBD activation, not just focused on Esk Street.
Alex.
Steve said what I was going to, so thank you.
Alan, then Grant.
No, actually, I'm talking about street closures. So
No.
Next one, right? Okay.
Grant.
Yeah, look, it's good to see something's happening and there's a bit of planning. I think this is a test and learn thing, so I think we should support it, see how it goes, get some good feedback and work out, if it generates what we're trying to do.
Nobby.
And just to reinforce that, when we first set up the joint streets, Don and Esk, there was the need for Don to be able to be in the entertainment area as well. And it's got much greater capacity than Esk. Esk has got very much restrictions on where you can put a stage, for argument's sake. Very limited. Where Don's a much wider street and has much better capacity if you wanted to have bands and things playing in here. So both have options. No, I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
Esk Street has a stage.
Right. Okay. So, any more questions for Steve on the activations? No. In that case, we just have to receive the report.
Yeah, we'll move it.
You'll move that. Seconded. Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Yes. Oh, it can't be Barry. Sorry, you can't. You're not on this committee. Leslie. Thank you. That's done. Now we go to temporary road closures.
Before we,
What is it? The pumps?
before we have a speaker on temporary road closures, can I just ask about page 27?
Page 27.
Yeah, so in the last report, the 8th of September event, Night Food Market, was specifically called the Esk Street one. I see here it's down as Don Street.
I think that's a typo because in the
So
previous one it says Esk Street.
Can we change that before we get a speaker?
Okay.
It was page 22, which was the last report, specifically said the 8th of September event was Esk Street Night Market.
Yeah,
And it's now saying we're going to approve a temporary closure on Don Street.
Yeah, but in the previous paper it says Esk Street Night Market.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
this one says Don
Yeah,
Street.
yeah.
We get-
So it needs to be
Steve,
changed.
are you able to comment on that? Is it the East Street Night Market on the 10th?
And there's actually two of them.
One of
There's
one
two.
of the reports has got to be wrong.
I would work on the basis that your application on the road closure.
There's
No,
East
it's Don
Street
Street.
and a Don one.
Is the correct one. That's the formal application paper. There might be a typo in my report. I'll take that.
in that case, page 22 specifically says night food market on Esk, timing Friday, 8th of September, Esk Street. So it's repeating Esk Street quite clearly.
The previous one was Don Street anyway, so.
Oh, yeah.
Don't we have two events?
So
Yeah,
we
there's-
are talking Don Street.
So there's two events.
Yeah.
So, and I think it is just a typo on the first one. So one's for East Street, one's for Dawn Street. If you look at the dates, one's the 8th of September, one's the 10th of November.
Yeah. Mm.
East Street's 8th of September.
Yeah.
Dawn Street's 10th of November. So I think...
And what I'm saying
road
is
closure
in this
Yeah, I know, but it should say Esk in the 8th of September one.
Well, before we start passing resolutions...
That's what I want to ask.
no.
Can we clarify it before we get to the resolutions or the presentation? Because if we approve the wrong road closure, it will look a bit...
I think, Mr. Chair, if we could let Erin and her team get that sorted, we'll just need to move on to the next paper.
Okay, we're going to...
and we will come back to that
We
with
will
an
come back.
answer.
Thank you, Leslie. We don't want to chisel anything in stone. We're going to cross out.
Are there any risks for us leaving it? Because I'm mindful that the next meeting...
No. It's only...
She's going to find out.
It's only like it's going to come after...
While we go
Thank
on to
you.
the next
It's
report.
definitely today. Nobby.
Yeah, look, I think there's no typo in the first paper. I think that if you look, there are monthly gaps, and I have pushed Great South to have a monthly event. So the way I read that is we've got a Women's World Cup in August, 1 month later in September we've got a food market on Esk, and then a month later we've got another food market in November on Don.
But it says Dawn
Okay,
and
Darren,
Dawn.
just after clarification here.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm just following on from what the
Yeah.
mayor said. I think we need to be careful in instructing Great South because it's provided the events conform. And I'll use the example of one that has a liquor licensing application for it, and we can't guarantee that that's going to happen until all criteria are met.
No, don't get me wrong. I wasn't suggesting it was wrong there.
No, hold
Not
on.
insurmountable, but it's just-
Can we just... Hey, Steve, do you reckon we'll be able to get an answer in 10 minutes? Okay, we will. So we're going to move on. We're going to move on to CCTV upgrade. Who is speaking to that?
It's been a long day.
Erin. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you, Chair. Russell Pearson is currently on annual leave and would normally be speaking to this report, but
Reckless.
I had definitely got the clear message that elected members were keen for an update on this one as soon as possible, so I didn't want to defer to the next meeting. So as requested, we've brought forward the report which provides the timings around delivery of the project. You'll see, I'll just draw your attention to the fact that we're running 2 streams of this work somewhat overlapping around the network design as well as the delivery aspects of the project. There is some amount of risk related to that, but we do believe that it's manageable and is required for us to be able to meet those deadlines that Council is seeking by the end of the year. Happy to take any questions.
Right, I'll open up for questions. Nobby.
Aaron, the issue is around the traffic management when we close the streets off. We raised this last time when we had the fire display down their street and the cost.
Oh, hold on, we're talking about CCTV.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, we jumped because we're waiting to get confirmation on the Don Esk saga.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Right, Leslie. Oh, sorry, Grant, then Leslie.
Listen, go for it.
Leslie.
My comment was just that the target is to have as many cameras installed and running by Christmas 2023 as we can, and I think we're all around the table keen that that happens, so it's good to see that the progress is going to make that a reality.
Okay, Grant.
Yeah. Firstly, thanks for coming through, and it's good to see some dates written down. The thing I got reading this paper is, you know, what are we trying to achieve here? And that, I think, should have a significant driver to how we deliver. And what I mean by that is how much involvement has there been with the police in actual specification of which areas come, you know, first and so forth. Because I think there's an element of you know, part of the community safe thing is preventative crime. And if I talk to the police, what they are saying they need is the ability to monitor arterial routes, because that's how they can trigger that there's criminal activity going to happen, particularly around drugs and those sorts of things. So that becomes a higher priority than perhaps some of the things here. So the question I've got is, what is the involvement of police in actually
Aaron, do you
the
have
plan
a comment
to roll out?
on that interaction?
I actually wasn't involved in those early workshops, but some people around the table were, who may be better to speak directly to.
Leslie was on the committee. Leslie, do you want to?
I am the remaining councillor who was on the committee, and yes, the police have been on the committee throughout and have been giving their input quite solidly throughout the process.
Because the lead person from the police is actually no longer working for the police. So my understanding from the police is there's no one currently in the police force here that has actually got responsibility for this.
Well, I can certainly tell you at the time that the committee met on the CCTV matter, the police were represented by a senior police officer.
Yeah.
And that person was giving the comment that we also had representation from the community patrol. We had Murray Wardens. They were all very much on the same page about the progress and what we wanted to see happening and the order of it happening.
Yeah,
so I'd be surprised if the police were now to say that there was a problem with the progress that's being suggested.
Well, the conversations I've had with the police in the last week says that they're not fully aware of the exact rollout plan in terms of those specifications.
Okay, look, I think when's Russell back from annual leave? A couple of months? Oh, tomorrow. Okay, so what I can do as chair, I can talk to Russell. We can liaise with the police, which is a good catch up, because I'd like to actually have a bit of a chat as well as chair to find out, and we can.
They're saying that there's some new faces, and therefore they've lost some of that sort of institutional knowledge. We can update the new faces.
So I'm
because it's a key part of
absolutely
safety.
Absolutely, Evelyn.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I don't want us to lose sight of one of the triggering events that actually drew our attention to the fact of how bad our CCTV was, is the murder in Don Street of a young person, which, even though there was a camera, was not able to service. So whilst the police have talked heavily about the crime prevention of drugs and other illegal activities that use the arterial routes, they're really, really mindful that the things that go on in the CBD are a huge source of workload for them at times. So I don't see that they would have a concern about the order of priority that is within this document, and I would hate to see us slow at any point. We've had a lot of feedback from businesses, from individual people, and all those sorts of things, but I don't want it to ever be forgotten that a young person died on Don Street, and we, not individually, but we as a city did not have good resources to help identify who did that as quickly as we could have, because our CCTV was not up to scratch. So for me, there's an element of personal in this, but I also think that as a council, we've said that we're going to do it. We've got a timeline. I don't think change of personnel sitting at the table should slow us down at all.
Nobby.
I was involved with the original stuff when we first started this journey, and just to reinforce what Evelyn said, the main driver was the CBD to start with, and public safety, and businesses feeling as though they were unsafe. The police then jumped in with arterial roads because they want the license plate recognition so that they can monitor criminal activities coming and going. And going is important as well, and so we've taken a staged approach. I guess there's two other things that have crept in more recent times, which, like Evelyn says, shouldn't slow us up, but it needs to be recognised. Emergency Management Southland have an interest in our CCTV network that we're developing, so that as they get a disaster, they can monitor what's going on around the streets very, very quickly, and where hotspots might be that they can't get past. And the last issue is the issue of hotspots. So, you know, do we have a camera on Stead Street Wharf? Do we have a couple out of Ototara that stopped cars being taken out there and burned on the beach and stuff like that? So I guess that's the priority for me, is to start there and just work your way out. The hotspots would be getting towards the end of that line as we build the network. We can't do it all on day one, but we certainly need to do it in the CBD, South City, Bluff, not Windsor.
Okay.
Well,
Grant?
It's not risky. So I suppose the point is, you know, what I want to absolutely ensure is the rollout gives us the best protection. I hear your point, Evelyn, I've had that feedback as well. Gives us the best protection as quickly as possible for our community, be it around catching criminals that have already committed crime or preventing crime that may be going to happen in drugs and that sort of thing. And that's what I want assurance for. It happens quickly and we achieve the outcomes for community as fast as possible.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you've got to realise that the implementation of the installation is two-part, because the number plate cameras are not the cameras that are going to catch crime. So the balance has to come from the wide view cameras that see everything, and then the number plate cameras are just focused on where the traffic goes. So we need to actually speak or have an update from police which are the key roads they want to monitor, because you don't want to be wasting those cameras, but a complete coverage.
Haven't they fed that in to all us?
Yes, and there, if councillors remember, there were very detailed maps
that they
available with the staging and the number of cameras. And we looked at that carefully from the point of view of staging to get the best bang for the available funding in the quickest possible time.
What I'm trying to say is that I'm making sure that they're aware of the view that camera is going to give them, and they don't expect more than that particular road view, and then that's where the other cameras cover the thing. So double checking everything is not a problem, because what you see on a plan and whatever, knowing from personal work experience, is not what you see in real life. And so just going over it, Barry.
Yeah, it worries me a wee bit that we're going to be looking at South City and Bluff as the last stages, whereas we're getting vandalism down at Stirling Point with these people breaking the $100,000 glass. It's just, why are we going to wait that long? It's a lot of money, and there's been a lot of damage down there.
Well, it
worries me that it's third on the list.
Well, it all boils down to the network as well. So the first thing that we do is the network, and the network that we install is going to only allow cameras, and the network will be able to be expanded. But Leslie, are you aware that network, how far does it reach?
Well, the intention was that it would be South City Bluff.
Okay,
but
so
it would start at the CBD, because that's where the subcommittee saw the necessity of the start. And as you say, the network cameras, once they're in, you can expand into the areas that were planned to be covered.
I think the points that have been raised are really good, and I think just a reassurance and another update can be brought back, and we can just do it informally on the timeline we've got here. So, Darren.
They can only install so fast. So it's a case of picking the three areas that, I mean, they're all getting done within 3 months.
Yep. Good point.
Yep, fantastic. So the recommendation is, I imagine that's reports to be received, and we're noting the timeline for December 2023. Nobby.
So will we do any PR around this? Any comms around what we're deciding on today with that time frame? Because I get a lot of feedback from the CBD and from the community patrols as well, that they're nervous that we say the end of the year, but then it just keeps pushing out a little bit. And a lot of this is not necessarily crime related, it's just people's perception that they feel safe.
Absolutely.
100%.
We haven't had anything to say until we made this decision.
Yeah, I know, but once we make the decision, will we then go out and do some PR or some comms, just to tell them, hey, this is where we're heading.
Right, can I have someone move those two recommendations? Move Darren, seconded Evelyn. Put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, that is carried. That takes us back to the temporary road closures, and we do have an update on the Esk Don thing. Steve?
Yeah, thank you. I've checked with our roading team, and all the closures are for Don Street, not S Street. So the correction is needed in my paper, not the application for the formal road closure. My apologies.
That's okay. Right, that takes us to that item, the temporary road closures. Does anyone want to speak to that on staff? Introduce that.
I don't have anything further to add, but can take any questions.
Okay, questions. Alan?
I've obviously got one question as to why the entire block needs to be closed for those events, because there is, there are other public facilities in the Kelvin Street end of that particular block, and there's also a residential premise here as well. So I'm just wondering why does the entire block need to be closed for the road?
Darren,
So there's road closures with traffic management. There'll be, as I understand it, specific areas fenced off. The residential area in Don Street will still have access, but you want to open to them only, not just all and sundry. So that's why the entire block is closed. We've done this before for other events. For example, when the Kiln Street Party and Tillman's used to have events in there, we still had to make sure that there was access for people to get up to a pharmacy that was in Don Street at the time. So we're not reinventing the wheel.
Because you do have the Invercargill club there.
Nobody's driving when they're having a drink, Alan, are they?
No, but they're getting dropped off by their wives. Some of them.
And they can come in off Space Street too, can't they?
No, they can't.
You can't walk up the side of Crookshank Pride.
No, you can't. Well, you could. Yes, you could.
Oh no, there's a dirty big building site there, isn't there?
Correct.
Okay, Nobby?
You can't walk.
We've had this issue before when we had the last event in S Street, is the cost of the traffic management. And I think that the last event it was $2,500. I mean, we had bollards up, and from what I saw, all the traffic management guys did was put some yellow cones on top of the bollards, and then just seemed to hang around a little bit. Correct me if I'm wrong. That seems an awfully expensive exercise that every time we put an event on, we're gonna have an automatic bill of $2,500, given that some of these closures are for less than 4 hours. And is there some consideration that maybe we might be able to renegotiate or find a cheaper contractor or do it in-house? I mean, I don't know.
I guess to both of those questions, the team within ICC obviously work with any event organiser to try to come up with as pragmatic an option as possible when it comes to closures of the roads and how much of that extent of roads needs to be closed, and they do do a lot of prompting and a lot of suggestions and that's happened here as well around how things can be best managed. When it comes to the actual traffic management side of things, I understand that there was some significant costs associated with the last event. The team have advised back around different ways that can be managed going forward. There still needs to be some traffic management because you're closing off that access from the other streets into the street, so you do need to have some setup at the entrance into the streets. But agree, you don't need to have that being monitored throughout the closed street, particularly in Esk. Event organisers can put in place essentially a standard template traffic management plan that's approved, and then it's quite a much quicker and less expensive process to roll that out, and that has been suggested by the team as well. What I'd say is I think this is new for everybody, and we'll make it find ways, I think, between both us and events organisers to streamline that as we continue to work together.
Okay, thank you.
I've got Evelyn, then Leslie.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I am going to say again that I'm quite perturbed that we've got 3 events happening in Don Street I do recognise that they are part of the CBD and they do contribute towards inner city activation. Acknowledge all of those things, but I think that it seems that we've turned Don Street into a two-way street that we're going to keep on closing down at least once a month, and that does not sit very well with me. And I just want my voice to be heard about that, because I think that there was an expectation that when it went back to a two-way street that it would be reasonably accessible all the time, that the limitation would be on Esk Street. So just putting it there, the decision will be made irrespective of what I say or think, but I am just a little uncomfortable that 3 events in a row on Don Street.
Erin, do you want to?
Yeah, I can add something to that. I understand part of the driver in particular for the food markets as well was around, if you recall back to the master planning work that we did, that Don Street was around that very much food based hub. Now, whether or not that's being taken a little bit too literally, I think is definitely something that we can have a discussion with Great South about. We were looking at whether or not we could bring them into this meeting, but timing was just a little bit too short to do that. But absolutely, we can get them to come in and have a discussion and receive some feedback from council around preferences for events moving forward.
Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Actually, it's 4 events in a row, not 3.
Oh, my bad.
Because the FIFA Women's World Cup is the first of them, and then there's the 2 food markets, and then there's the street dine. So it's 4 events in a row. But putting that aside, getting back to the road closure, considering that the expected attendance at these events is a couple of thousand people at each one, I would rather that we actually had a decent closure of the entire section between D Street and Calvin Street for safety purposes than mess around with trying to close a lesser portion of the street. Just seems to me if we're expecting a 2,000 attendance, at least initially we should err on the side of a road closure that's going to be as effective as possible for those numbers.
Trish.
And this is really for Erin. I wonder whether you'd pass on to Shami that there was a very successful night food market held over here outside the church. It was particularly well attended, in fact, so much so the food ran out early on. It was a lovely sort of ambience of place, and just if you would consider that when you're thinking about food markets as well.
It's a very good location.
You were there?
Yeah, that was perfect.
Alex.
Thank you. Absolutely. The one next door was a roaring success, and I'm actually personally really excited to see this vibrancy in the inner city and some of our brand new spaces that we've invested so much being utilised in different ways. For me personally, I don't see a problem, sorry, Evelyn, with closing the streets once a month. I think that actually having a reason to be in the inner city and bringing people in and having that, I guess, sense of something to do in areas that hasn't been done before, I think is absolutely of benefit to the city. And I'm glad we're doing something at least once a month, and I hope that we can maintain that momentum. If they want to close any more streets for public vibrancy and community benefit, I know, majority of people that I know that went along to this would absolutely be all for it. So.
Okay, before I put the motions, question, Erin, is that under community views, it states that event organisers are required to liaise with affected businesses to minimise disruption. Now, do we have evidence that they actually do that? I mean, it's great that we've got it written there, but do we have a checklist, or do we just take it for granted and hope?
We provide instruction around what steps need to be taken. In terms of us checking around whether those steps have been taken, we don't. We do it at random and based on feedback, as opposed to going out and proactively monitoring.
Right. So we do it. So if there's feedback saying boy, we didn't know about this, then that's how we liaise with our affected businesses. Right. Okay. No, that's okay. Right. The recommendations are we receive the report, we resolve the proposed events outlined, will not impede traffic unreasonably, and approve the temporary road closures as permitted under the Local Government Act, subject to receiving a safety plan for each event. That's subject to receiving it, so we don't have those yet.
No, not for all those events.
No, but
we don't get it.
I'll move that way, Mr. Chair.
Right. Second. Thank you. That's moved and seconded. I'll put those 3 recommendations. All those in favour?
Aye. Aye.
Against? That is carried. Takes us now to...
Sorry, Chair, could we just note that I abstained?
Oh, you abstained because...
I might need to sign something later.
You might.
And I actually voted against.
Oh, you voted
didn't see
against.
me.
Rightio.
Thank you.
Evelyn wants to be.
Recorded.
Darren abstained. Recorded. Takes us to the activities report. Steve?
I'm actually no. I'll be speaking to that one today. Although I'm happy to just take the report as read and take any questions.
Okay, Tom.
Through you, Chair. Erin, when I look at the stormwater upgrade on D Street, and I note the comment that there was a 1 month delay because of the archaeological find. My question is, who makes the decision about, how long such a delay would be acceptable? It was a pretty low level, as I understand it, pretty low level archaeological find, box drain. A month seems a long time. So were we required to do that by some other body, or did we elect to delay it by a month, or what was the process?
There's a couple of pieces that were factoring into that. One was that the timing was definitely not on our side with regard to that one, because we've come off a period where we used to have a global consent for heritage-based discoveries, archaeological discoveries, and we were actually, this one fell in the period between that global consent finishing and our new process starting. So that left us very much at the as being sort of held up while that new process was put in place. Going forward, we would hope that we'd be a little bit more streamlined at that. But that being said, there is legislative requirements around what we need to do when we encounter an archaeological find, and we absolutely have to follow that process.
Yeah, okay, through you again, Chair, I hear that, Erin, but did it have to be a month? I mean, I just observed that, in the UK, if you're running a road like that and you make an archaeological find, you get 48 hours to investigate it before you got to restart. So just a month seems extraordinary. So what I was trying to get to was whether that month was a consequence of something that we did, or whether we were absolutely required to delay by a month.
It was, we didn't just voluntarily step back. We had several phone conversations with all sorts of different people around what we could do to get things moving forward faster. But absolutely, until we had that heritage sign off to start moving again, we weren't able to move. That being said, we were still learning through the process of what we needed to do with that. Now we'd moved off the global consent, so there were some things we could have done better as a council as well, but absolutely we were held up waiting on that sign off.
Thank you.
Further questions on the activities report? Trish.
I'd just like to know when the new housing for aged care will come in. When will the first lots, have they started yet? The new housing that we've got. Ground has been broken.
You're asking difficult questions today.
Oh, sorry.
Has new housing, those new housing units, have they been started? Or?
Yeah, the works on site are currently underway. Absolutely.
It's only like 2 years.
So is there any proposed time when they're going to be finished?
Lee would have that off the top of his head. I don't, but I can send that around.
No, it's okay. I'm going to keep asking.
Yeah, it's one of those reports that goes through finance and projects, so perhaps not everybody has visibility of it, and we'll look to send it around.
Thank you.
You're not old enough yet.
Okay, further questions for Erin? Okay, that being the case, there's 3 recommendations. We received the report, we note the timeline for the D Street stormwater works, and we note the data trends across 3 waters, rating and housing. Can I have someone move those, please? Thank you, Alan. Seconded, Grant. I'll put those motion. Anyone, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. That takes us to the last item, which is the strategic approach. Oh, okay. Sorry, we've just been advised that. Sorry, Barry, you were a part of the mover and seconder there. We just need to receive that again, that item. So, moved Grant, seconded Trish. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right. Thank you. We
just Barry moved something earlier on.
No, it's all sorted.
Sorted as well.
Sorted. Okay, Erin, do you want to speak to this?
Absolutely. So apologies for this being a very large report. I guess what I would say is you can take your time to read as much of it as you would like, or I also understand if it's a little bit too detailed focused for some. But we had some workshops around the long-term plan. One of the discussions was around solid waste, and there were some questions raised on waste minimisation as to whether we should be taking a more strategic approach in terms of slowing down and figuring out what our priorities were, or as I saw it also, or alternatively leveraging the strategic work that's already being done nationally and by other authorities and looking to move forward with some quick wins in that respect. What Annie then did off the back of that workshop during the week last week was pull together some of the background strategic information that we already have to hand to inform that conversation.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's a really good paper. I'd like to see it put on the resource piece, please, because I think it's a great reference point. And from my perspective, it gives me good clarity around sort of where we're aiming for. And so, yeah, well done to the staff for getting it forward. So just in terms of page 40 of Board Box, your waste hierarchy piece. So those and the next one on 41, that's the sort of, if we're trying to envisage what we need to be aiming for around waste management, it's those 2 things that capture it for me. Is that a fair indication? Yeah. Okay, cool. So councillors could note those 2 pages. We'd be a long way forward.
Okay, Evelyn.
Supporting what Councillor Dermody said about I can't say that I've read it in depth because I'm going to have to go back and reread it. There was a lot in there. But one of the things that struck me was that whilst we've been talking about a long-term plan, and this paper has been provided, which is really great, but where are we at talking with some of our other partners, like the likes of the Mitre 10s and those who already pick up some of those things like light bulbs and garden things and all that, those bits and pieces, about what they do and how much we can do together to promote those things, because I think it would be really valuable for community to actually understand. It comes off the back of what the youth councillor said this morning too, about people feeling overwhelmed, about things coming at them. What can we do? Well, this is what we can do with batteries. This is what we can do with light bulbs. This is what we can do with their, plant containers or whatever. And these are who our partners are. And actually, instead of the negative stuff, because the negative stuff's really scary and negative, but can we highlight some of the positive things that are actually happening already that are making a difference? And maybe we attract some other people who might say, well, actually, I could do this. One of the things that came up was about paint. Now, there might be an organisation that would be grateful for half tins of paint for something that they do within their community group or whatever. So instead of things being wasted, how can we reuse or alternatively use? Where do we find our partners? How do we find them? And how much difference just those little steps could make?
So within council, and time flies, but within the last few months we employed a council or a waste net waste minimisation officer. Jackie has been out learning a whole lot about the new world of waste, and particularly around who we can partner with in that space. In particular, Mitre 10 is one of those organisations that she's been working with around, in particular, their battery disposal, and we're just working through what we need to do to potentially support that process that they have in place, keeping in mind that we also need to make sure that we're covering all of those wonderful things like health and safety and stuff like that. And we expect to be taking a proposal on that to the next WasteNet meeting. I guess I would hope that anybody who is on social media is signed up to the WasteNet Facebook page, and you'll hopefully have seen a little bit more reinvigorated WasteNet with lots more messaging coming through. What we're also looking at is how we can get the message out to the community through other methods other than social media, keeping in mind that from a waste minimisation perspective, we don't want to be doing a mailbox drop, but just how do we get that information out there?
Nobby.
Thank you. Look, quite a helpful report, but it lacks some things for me. So given this report, the Solid Waste Regional Report of 2018, which is now 5 years since, no mention in there about the fact that the city has the recycling contract in its own right, and we have a supplementary contract with SDC, so somebody coming in new to council would not know that. There's no mention in here that for the last 5 years, Gore has not done any recycling at all. They just put everything to landfill. And they're now 9 months after the this current term started with a commitment that they were going to do something about it, and they've done nothing. And I'm not dumping on them, but it doesn't give an accurate picture if you want to do that. There's no mention of the palletising plant that's giving us probably some cutting edge stuff by New Zealand standards. And while the report talks about the ideal world of education and bin inspections and stuff like that, there's no mention at this stage that the status quo 5 years later is we're not doing any of that. I know we're heading towards it, but we're not doing any at the moment. So you could read this report and be really excited about it all, but our actual stock take on what we're doing at the moment is pretty poor.
Look, I'm going to jump in as chair there and also a WasteNet member, and I will totally agree with the Mayor. And what he's raised is that it states in here in the background that Southland's waste strategy is driven by our joint WMMP. That's our Waste Minimisation Management Plan. And that was redone in 2020 and goes to 2026. Now, if you read that plan, I did that this morning, it opens up by saying that the plan adopts a holding pattern. And we are working to a plan that's holding. Now, if you're running an airline, you're not going to do very well. So basically the plan, as I see it, and I read through it this morning, is not fit for purpose. No. So really the question is, and including that SWAP report that Nobby refers to, 2018, we really need to be working, if we're going to achieve anything, with something that's more current and fit for purpose. Aaron, do you want to, I mean, this is obviously WasteNet's territory, but seriously, that WMP is just a load of words, and doesn't even mention glass separation. It's wanting.
I think what I'd say to that is that those big strategic projects like WMMP and strategic reviews, they do take a lot of resource, and they usually take a lot of external expertise as well to feed into. What we currently have at the moment, like it or not, is quite a generally clear direction out of central government around where they want local authorities to go in this space. At this stage, the discussion at an officer level within the WasteNet organisations has been to take that direction and move forward into some tangible actions, because that's what we've felt like our councils have been looking for from us, is a little bit of stop talking about it and start doing it. So that's the feedback that we've taken on board. There's obviously the opportunity, if Invercargill City wants to seek or to go to WasteNet and advise they'd like a different direction in that space, then that's absolutely ICC's prerogative also.
Well, it just says that we are driven by this plan, and we have a plan that has no drive. So I think we've got a problem, and especially with the 5-year-old data that we have to work with, is that does this committee need to formally request that WasteNet actually does something, or how do we do it? Because obviously the difference I notice, that being around this table, we have far more debate, we have far more constructive debate. If I go to WasteNet and I sit around with the delegates from Gore and from Southern District, it's a bit like pulling teeth. In fact, to give you an example, last WasteNet meeting, I took to them a recommendation from this council requesting funding for a project, a waste minimisation funding. That only just got through. The mayor was there, and it was our money to use, but it required both Gore and Southern District to approve us using our money. And really, after half an hour of debate, we only just got it through. So I'm just wondering, the way forward, are we going to get action through WasteNet, or this committee seems far more flexible? So just want to ask Erin that, but I'll carry on.
Me to respond before other questions? Yeah. Look, what I'd say honestly is, from an officer perspective, we seem to be getting clear direction out of WasteNet at the moment. Now, I do understand that sometimes takes some tussle of priorities at the political level, but it's probably not holding up staff at this point in time.
Okay, right. Leslie, then Grant, then Alex, then Noe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've got no problem at all with the first recommendation, which is receiving the strategic approach, and I agree some of the data in it is a bit elderly. But the second one is offering us a choice, and the choice that we're asking, or that staff is asking us for guidance on, is whether this council leverages the work of other authorities around New Zealand to guide the next steps on our city's waste minimisation journey, or whether we want a more comprehensive strategic review. It seems to me that a more comprehensive strategic review is going to hold us up for 18 months of review that we probably don't need, because even in the paper we've got, as Erin has pointed out, there is a very clear steer about the sort of things we're being asked or encouraged to deliver, that we've expressed around this table on several occasions that we actually want to get some movement in a whole host of waste issues. We've got some practical things that we've discussed that we could be moving on, and I just really wouldn't like to provide guidance to staff at this point that says we want to spend 18 months directing staff to do a strategic review when we could be getting on with the practical stuff that we've discussed fairly endlessly. So I'm actually quite keen that we agree we could leverage work from other authorities, that we've already expressed around the table several ideas that we could make progress on, and that we probably do want staff of the city to act on that rather than spend a lot of time and staff resource in a strategic review that to some extent will tell us what we already know about the direction government would like us to go and actually, what we ourselves want to do.
Leslie raises a point. I just want to interrupt there. The request for a strategic review wouldn't actually come from this committee under the current way it works. It would come from, any review would be requested by WasteNet, because it would be WasteNet staff doing the review.
Absolutely. So if Invercargill City was keen for that to happen, then it would advocate to WasteNet for that to happen.
Okay.
Or alternatively, Invercargill City can employ somebody to do that review separately.
Okay, Grant.
Yeah, so I don't know, maybe I've got the wrong end of the stick, but I think we asked for this paper to give us some sort of idea around the framework for how we should be. Well, two things. One, to check in where we're at currently, acknowledging the fact that what you've raised, Chair, around, could be a throwaway comment, but it seems like it's a reasonably dysfunctional sort of setup in terms of, and the confidence I would have that WasteNet can deliver the outcomes that we might want as a city. There seems to be a gap. So I think it's imperative that we at least have a check-in to say, let's revisit what we want to achieve from our waste minimalisation goals as this City Council, and then that gives us the opportunity to review, can we achieve that through the current commercial relationship we have within WasteNet? If not, then how can we affect change within that to get those goals for our city, which should be very similar to the other stakeholders, and then we stay in that relationship. Or if it's too big a gap to bridge and it's really important for us to go forward as a city, we look at other alternatives. So the purpose of receiving this, particularly the first report, is to provide that initial, let's have a bit of a workshop around what does our waste management and minimisation current strategy look like under this framework? Where can we make changes? Can we make those changes and they be effective through WasteNet ASAP so we can get on with it instead of kicking it around the table for another 8 years? Or do we take another course of action? So that's how I see it. I don't know what other people think, but that's how I see it.
You raise a good point, and for anything to happen, the trouble is you've got this dual committee thing. You got what you want here around the table today, and then you've got WasteNet, and that's where the problem lies. I'll keep going. Alex.
Thank you. A few things. Firstly, there is no misalignment between what everybody wants. The outcomes are waste reduction. Everybody wants waste reduction. Southland wants waste reduction. Gore wants waste reduction. Whether or not they haven't been actually collecting it because of political reasons is irrelevant. The fact is everybody wants waste reduction. The WMMP was put in a holding pattern because we knew that the government was going to be releasing a whole lot of information that we would have to rise to accommodate. We now have that information. We've got very clear steer from the government as to what we now need to pick up and do. Kicking it around the table and rehashing the WMMP right now, when we've already got a clear direction of what we need to rise to, would actually just delay the sequence even more and cost us significant resource to do so. I honestly think that we should just let them get on with it. We need to get on with it. WasteNet needs to get on with it. The WasteNet needs to get on with the delivery for the outcomes that are really clearly outlined in this report and what they've said that we'll do. We also need to do the same with holding our contracts that we have with our provider. They've got a job to do, which is going to serve the outcomes that we've asked for, and we've got a job to do that we've said that we would.
Nobby.
Yep, thank you. Look, I'll comment on a few things here because I've had the misfortune of sitting in the last 2 or 3 WasteNet meetings. Look, we've got the worst regional waste minimisation results in the country, so that's nothing to be proud about. This is not a staff issue. It's a lack of leadership from us, and we're not forceful enough with our colleagues in the other 2 councils. Erin was instrumental in getting that dollars for Recycle South for that $80,000. I sat through that meeting, and if she hadn't made the statement she made, we would have been up the creek without a paddle. I don't think there's a need for a strategic review. The dysfunction for me sits with the other 2 councils, and I'll give you a couple of examples so that you understand. I heard people just saying today things that we could do. Well, you need to be very careful. What we want to do as a council is not necessarily what the collective wants to do. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. I spoke at the last one about the need to deal to glass. Glass is a big issue for us. District said, well, no, we don't go down that track on glass. We're not going to do glass collection in bins. We'll just have little wee bins sitting out around our rural areas. And I understand that. When I asked Gore what their response to glass was, the mayor just looked at the table and didn't respond. And that's because they're not doing any recycling, so they're not interested in just isolating glass out of their other recyclables because it's ruining the contents that they may be able to recycle. They're just not doing any at all. And so, in one breath, we hear Alex saying, look, all the stakeholders want to do waste minimisation. Well, that's actually not what's happening. Gore hasn't done it for 5 years plus. And even though they've had a mayor come in that said he was right into all this stuff, 9 months down the track, he hasn't done anything. And so we're caught up in that. Our results are tied up with our colleagues. And so it's all very well for us to say, well, we will just go ahead and do our own thing, and that's maybe a pathway we go down that track. But why would our ratepayers pay for argument's sake, for glass recycling when we've got $700,000 plus sitting in reserves in WasteNet, which we struggle to get access to? So for me, it's still dysfunctional. We need to take a strong lead on it. And if we don't get the ball being played by the others, we just need to go it alone, but we need to get hold of that money that sits in that reserve so that we can fund what we need to fund. Our ratepayers shouldn't be paying twice.
Okay, look, just to get people straight on the importance of the waste minimisation plan, it is no different to our long-term plan that we have to comply with central government. Yep. It's stipulated in the Waste Minimisation Act 2008, and that plan has to be accurate. You can't park it and have one that says one thing and you just go and we'll do what the government tells us. That does not work. That plan must align with what council does, and that's what it's for. So if the plan's not appropriate, we need to fix it, because otherwise we're just breaching our own directions. That is a critical document, and it needs to be sorted. And if we don't have that right, I can't see how we can move forward. So, Alex.
Actually, no, it's not worth it.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair,
Tom.
are you advocating for a strategic review?
No, look, I think what we need to ask WasteNet is for them to tell us what their priorities are, what's going to happen in the next 1 year, 2 years. And we need to, as councillors, we need to know that. And it needs to come from WasteNet. And this council needs to voice its opinion that this needs to happen right now, and we want action, not talk. So next was Tom, and then Evelyn.
So look, I don't think we need another strategic review.
No.
I do think that this. I mean, waste is, it's like a multi-headed beast, isn't it? I mean, there's all sorts of streams that we've got to tackle, and I mean, I would just like to see us getting on and tackle one or two of them. And there are obvious targets. I mean, glass is an obvious one. Nobby, you spoke before about a piece of equipment was for plastic, wasn't it? And I don't know where that one's gone. But I mean, I would rather see us as a city. We can still leave it under WasteNet, but I mean, as a city, just moving ahead and knocking off one or two of these projects. I don't think it needs a grand strategy, because it's, again, it just delays it for a year or 18 months. So.
The plastic one, Tom, is a palletising plant that basically can take all classes of plastic with the exception of bottle tops, palletise them, which means that they can be sold and reused, so that minimises the impact of single use. It's massive. If we get the plant up and running, which we should do, it'll be impacted nationwide. I mean, we will lead the country in it. It's huge. But the other beauty of it is, if you send away plastic in a bundle, and then you take that bundle out to the plant and you palletise it, you treble the cost of what you get for it at the other end. Like, it's huge. It's a real money maker.
I need to carry on here. Evelyn, then Trish.
So I think if we are following a national direction, that there's things that we've been asked to do, instructed to do, perhaps is possibly a better way of putting it. And it is within our power as a city to do that. Why should we be held back by the fact that we are also part of WasteNet? I don't see the two things as being mutually exclusive. If we can do a better job in one area than our partner councils are doing, which obviously every case is different. I understand the difference in distances that are involved and the quantities that are involved from Southland District. I totally get that. That does not mean, from my perspective, that we should not do anything about glass. That does not mean that we shouldn't do something about anything that is within our power to do. I think what we're abrogating our responsibility as citizens and as governors of this city, the elected members would be, in my view, abrogating their responsibility as governors of this city if the opportunity and the drive was there to do something on behalf of the environment of this city, and we don't do it because the rest of our partners aren't there yet. I'm, I guess, challenging us as a collective to do the hard stuff and just say, we're ready to do it. If you're not ready to do it, it's okay, because we will put our money where our mouth is and we'll do it and be an example.
Okay, just to jump in there, the way WasteNet is funded by a percentage of the waste that goes to landfill, part of the $360, including GST tonnage rate. WasteNet claims part of that for every waste generated out of Southland. So it is funded. WasteNet gets funded from waste. And for us to jump outside that, and that money is used to pay staff and also build up funding to do stuff. And if we decide to do, as Evelyn said, maybe go it alone, then we're jumping away from our shared service agreements. And I would see that, and just to jump in, being on WasteNet, I would say that, that's what I'm saying. This committee talks far more positively than the debates we have around WasteNet, and it's encouraging. But what I would like to do is to go back to WasteNet and say that this committee wants action and would like a list of things that are going to be done in the next year and what is happening. We don't need the review. I totally agree. 2 can be scrubbed, and we just put a request to WasteNet to advise this council the things that are going to happen. If they don't, then it could come back, and we, as Evelyn said, this council could just operate on its own. And WasteNet ticks all the boxes with shared services. The government looks at it going, great, you're all working together. And the unfortunate thing about it, it just doesn't work at a governance level. And that's a bit unfortunate. Trish.
I think Tom's absolutely right. We need to get to knock 2 or 3 things off. I believe we cannot wait a year or 18 months for WasteNet to do something. I think we should give them clear direction that within 2 months we want them to show us what they have achieved, give us three things, or we give them 3 things we want done, and we review it in 2 months. And even if they haven't completed what they want to do, if they've actually made some significant move on that, because we won't get any action if we just keep wanting them to do it. I think we have to drive it a bit.
Okay, look, I'm gonna wind this up now. And Trish, would you be happy in amending that recommendation 2, that we just request what you said, and it can come back to this council, and otherwise we're just going around in circles.
Yeah, I would. If people are happy with that.
Yeah. You're going to have to stipulate what you said for the purpose of Malavika.
Okay, well, what we'd like to do then is this committee requests WasteNet to provide within 2 months a strategic the plan for the next 2 years.
No.
Actions.
What we want,
Actions. Sorry, actions. What
we
actions
want
are
some
going to be done?
specific work reported back to us what they're going to do very shortly, not within 2 months, and then within 2 months achieve that and come back to us or work towards achieving that.
Well,
the-
give them a specific
It's-
project proposal.
No, look, we've
From the
got.
officers.
Look, we've. Sorry, Leslie. Yeah.
I don't think that is going to achieve at all what we're talking about. I think it will just add to a time delay where we don't get to do anything, and it still becomes a bit of a talk fest, because we know on the priorities we've identified, like the glass recycling, that both Southland District and Gore have indicated they're not at the same stage as us.
Yeah.
I don't think that we've got a choice of going it alone and sort of pulling out a waste net. We can stay as part of WasteNet, but suggest to WasteNet that we are able to commence as the city on something like the glass recycling initiative, which Southland District and Gore could come into at a later stage. So glass recycling for us, we could progress not by pulling out a WasteNet or saying we're going it alone, but saying to WasteNet, we would be the first adopter.
Unfortunately, we cannot progress unless we get the buy-in and the formal authorization. And just to give you the idea about the small amount we requested the other day, that was hard enough, let alone putting forward any other requests.
So that's what I'm saying, like Tom has said, if we go back with something definite, like we would be the first adopter for glass
exactly what I mean.
recycling. It's exactly, Tom and I are on the same page.
I'll just interrupt Erin.
So I'm just conscious we may be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves on this one. I know that there's been discussions perhaps politically around what different councils' views are at the moment, but at this stage the staff report has not gone to WasteNet, which would be prepared by my team, to go to them to say, here are the costs associated with glass out, here are your different options for whether or not one council does that, two councils do that, three councils do that, and for, I guess, all of the partner councils to have that information in front of them and make a decision. Based off that piece of work, we may find that we don't have a problem and all three councils actually want to go in, or we may find that one or two councils don't want to go in, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't go ahead with it, because as was given the example at the moment, we actually have different service provision across the different councils at the moment, which we see with Gore not providing the same services as the other two councils do.
So Mr. Chair, that would be to me a more positive way of going back to WasteNet. If we asked staff, Erin leading it obviously, to produce a paper that went to WasteNet that set out what you've just advised.
Okay, and that replaces two?
That would replace two.
Definitely.
And if we paused for a few minutes, we could probably work on some wording that encompassed what everybody was
I'm going to
comfortable
hand
with.
over to Nobby.
Look, just one thing to be mindful of. We could put up a priority on glass. That's our number one issue at the moment. Palletising plant will take what it takes. So the issue is not the fact that Gore's doing nothing. The issue is we need to do something about our glass. It ruins our recycling process. So we could put up something saying that we want glass to be resolved and resolved quickly. If the other two councils don't want to go down that pathway yet, they're not ready for it, or don't want to go down the pathway we want to go down, that's fine too, as Leslie said. But the stumbling block is we've got to have the money to do what we need to do. And at the moment, that money is tied up in WasteNet. Our share is about $700,000 sitting there in reserves, and we've got to get the approval of the other two. So part of the paper that needs to go is to say, we want to resolve glass. If you don't want to go on the journey, you've got to release our share of that reserve so that we can go on the journey. That's where we came to last time with the 80,000.
And Erin
So
was
can we
saying
put
she
that-
could include costings in the paper
Yep.
that would give those options,
That
which
would be
might
resolved
make it then easier for the other two councils to
Together.
agree that that was
Yep.
a productive way
Agree
forward.
with that. The money's the
We
key.
were the first adopter, that some money
Yep.
could be released.
Sure.
It
So-
just seems more productive to.
So just to give you an update on the glass, the process forward of that is that the options that we're going to consult the public on are going to be done. They have to be done during the LTP. There is no shortcut, unfortunately. I've talked this through with staff, and and it has to be done. But it doesn't mean that it's that the funding issues Nobby talks about, we can't have those sorted in advance by requesting, because we haven't done that yet. But the process has to go through the LTP.
So if we don't have that in advance, the funding agreement to come out of WasteNet, when we go to consult with the public, it'll hit rates.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
That's correct.
So they're double paying.
Yeah, and the other thing is procurement. The other issue we have is procurement issues of bins, and we just need to staff are working on that as well, because we can't preempt something for our LTP.
But there would be nothing to stop us putting forward such a staff paper to WasteNet that at least got an indicative.
Is that okay, Erin?
decision.
Yes, absolutely. So we're working through that at the moment. We have initial prices from Bond. I just need to go back and ask some further questions for us to be able to form that up. We won't be going to the next meeting of WasteNet, which is in about 10 days' time. It will go to the following one.
Okay. Do you have something for us?
We're just about to type it up.
Just about to type it up. So in the meantime, I'm going to go Alex, then Barry.
I think I just want to wrap up a little bit of what that last statement was. You're right that if we were to go it alone individually and request WasteNet to dip into those reserves, that would potentially be for the initial, I don't know, containers for glass or whatever it is the result of our investigation would be. But if it was a general CapEx lift and then a new contract, then that would be something that we would have to absorb individually without the other councils. So that would be either be a rates rise because we're upgrading our levels of service, and that's not part of the shared service. That's an us decision, not a collective benefit decision. So there could be potential rates rises in there if we do decide to go down that track.
So can I just can I reflect on that, please?
Yeah.
Through your chair. But again, if we've got 700,000 sitting in reserves at the moment with WasteNet, if we can't get partner agreement for us to do what we need to do, regardless of whether they want to do it, then that money's just frozen. Yeah. A good example was the 80,000 for the palletising plant that both Barry and Rangi talked about before. It was like pulling hen's teeth, and thank you to Erin for getting us over the line on that. But the issue was they weren't prepared to commit to that palletising plant upgrade. But it was really interesting. I said, well, that's okay, we'll fund it. We'll get the credit for it nationally. Oh, hang on, no, we don't want you saying it's an Invercargill credit. We want to get some spin out of this as well. I said, well, if you want to get some spin out of it, you've got to free up the money. You can't have a penny both ways on this issue. So,
can I carry on?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, I appreciate that, Your Worship. But if it isn't got an ongoing year-on-year glass recyclables collection, or like that's going to be a year-on-year OPEX cost rather than just a one-off reserves cost, we're going to have to fund it somehow.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think it is like I get really uncomfortable when I hear some of the comments being thrown around the room about WasteNet being this big old scary situation where they're all just dominating us and won't let us do what we want with our money and it's our money, and it's like pulling hen's teeth, because it's really important to check the history on that situation, that before there was tension or political dysfunction with WasteNet, it was touted as the poster child, the golden child example of how a joint venture, joint services agreements can work together and work in synchronicity. Everyone worked really well together for many years until we became the problem and we politically pulled out of a unanimous decision. So I get really uncomfortable when the people sit in the room and throw around all of these things about our regional partners that we work together with on many other things, not just WasteNet. They're the same people, they're the same councils, they're the same officers doing really good work for us, and it all kind of just gets swept under the carpet sometimes because of the political environment. So I just really wanted to clarify that too. Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess I can't let that one go as chair, being on WasteNet since 2010. I think poster child is probably an exaggeration. In fact, I was booted off WasteNet by the committee in 2019 for speaking my mind about what Invercargill needed to do. So if anyone thinks that WasteNet really is interested in Invercargill, they need to take another thought. That's my opinion on it, and I've probably know more about WasteNet than anyone here in this room. So we have Ria, finally. Sorry about that.
No, I'm okay. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to ask you after all of this.
So we have something new. Right, we have request staff to prepare and present a report to WasteNet on glass recycling with options for 1, 2 or 3 councils, and if Invercargill City Council choose to proceed by themselves, the relevant funds would be released from WasteNet. And there would be OPEX costs, but they are based on rates. The funds would be used to subsidise the initial purchase of bins, if that is what the LTP comes out as. So, can I have someone move? Ria. Ria would like to move those 3. Seconded Tom. 2. Oh, sorry, we got a. Sorry, I put my glasses on. 2 recommendations.
Tom seconded.
Tom seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. And I'd like to thank the committee for the debate on this, because it's a serious matter, and as I said before, it's great to show the interest.
Can I just check that staff are comfortable that we've given enough direction for the current time? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes. Right, we're going to, someone please move, we're going to public excluded because we're going to talk about some secret squirrel stuff. So.
I'll move.
Second.
Put that motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Public.